The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and flowers, two scents that always reminded Emily Grace Johnson of the hospital. She had never seen flowers before. She only knew them through touch, through the gentle petals placed in her hand by kind nurses, through the descriptions her friends whispered into her ears. Red roses, Emily, they're bright and full of love. Daisies are white, like clouds in the sky. But for her, the world was nothing but darkness, a prison she had been trapped in since she was 5 years old. Emily's greatest dream was simple, just to see the sunlight once in her life, to know what the color blue looked like, to look into the eyes of the people she loved. But dreams came with a price. And for Emily, the price was far greater than she ever imagined. She was 25 now, working as a piano teacher in her small-town church. Music was her escape, her way of painting the world she could not see. The children adored her, the congregation admired her strength, but deep inside Emily carried an unbearable ache. She was tired of pretending that blindness did not hurt. And that's when Dr. Michael Carter entered her life. Michael was tall, confident, and one of the most renowned eye surgeons in the city. He was respected for his skills but whispered about for his arrogance. To him, patients were not people, they were puzzles to solve, cases to win. Love had no space in his heart, or so it seemed. The first time Emily heard his voice, it was firm yet strangely kind. "Emily Johnson, I've reviewed your case. There's a chance we could restore your sight. It's risky, but it's possible." Her breath caught in her throat. Possible. The word felt like a miracle. For years she had been told there was no hope. And now, this stranger was telling her otherwise. But before her joy could fully bloom, Michael added words that shattered her heart into confusion. "There's a condition," he said, his tone colder now. "I don't perform this surgery for just anyone. I'm not running a charity. But I need something in return." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael's voice lowered, almost ashamed but still firm. "Marry me. Be my wife. Then I'll give you your eyes." The silence in the room was deafening. Emily's cane trembled in her hand. Marry him. She didn't know him. She had never seen his face. She had dreamed of love, of a marriage born from connection, faith, and God's plan, but this sounded like a bargain, a cruel transaction. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Michael didn't answer immediately. His footsteps echoed across the floor as he stood near the window, staring out. "Because you're pure, different, and because I don't believe in love anymore. But I do need a wife. So I'm offering you a deal. Your sight, in exchange for a marriage. Nothing more." Emily's heart twisted. Was this a test from God? Could she sacrifice her dream of true love just to see the world? That night she cried, alone in her small apartment. She touched her face, wondering what she even looked like. Would she regret it if she said yes? Would she regret it if she said no and remained in darkness forever? Her best friend, Sarah Miller, held her hand and prayed with her. "Emily, sometimes God opens doors in strange ways. Maybe this man is the path to your miracle. And who knows? Maybe you're the path to his." 2 weeks later, Emily made the most life-changing decision of her life. She said yes. She became Mrs. Emily Carter, wife to a man she hardly knew, a man she couldn't even see, but a man who held the power to change her entire world. But Emily didn't know the truth behind Michael's coldness. She didn't know the scars he carried in his soul, the betrayal that had turned his heart into stone. She didn't know that behind his demand for marriage was a secret that would shake her faith, her love, and her entire understanding of trust. And she didn't know that when the bandages would finally come off after her surgery, what she would see with her new eyes would not be the world she dreamed of, but a truth far more painful, yet far more beautiful than she ever imagined. The wedding was nothing like the fairy tales Emily had once imagined as a little girl. There was no glittering gown chosen by her, no grand procession, no heartfelt vows exchanged with trembling hands and teary eyes. Instead, there was a small chapel, a short ceremony arranged by Dr. Michael Carter's assistant, and a bride who could not even see the man she was promising her life to. Emily wore a simple white dress that Sarah had helped her pick. Her fingers traced the fabric nervously as the pastor's voice echoed through the hall. "Do you, Michael Carter, take Emily Johnson to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Michael's voice was steady, emotionless. "And do you, Emily Johnson, take Michael Carter to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her lips trembled. For a moment she wanted to run, to scream that this wasn't right, that marriage should be about love, not bargains. But then she remembered the promise of sight, the dream that had haunted her since childhood. She took a deep breath, squeezing Sarah's hand one last time before letting go. "I do." The rings were exchanged. The kiss, if one could call it that, was a brush of lips so cold and formal that Emily's heart ached. When it was done, people clapped politely. And just like that, she was Mrs. Emily Carter. Michael didn't hold her hand as they left the chapel. He simply guided her with a soft touch on her shoulder, almost as if he was afraid of her. Emily tried to smile, but inside her chest was a storm of confusion. Was this truly God's plan for her? Had she made the right choice? The ride to his house was silent. Michael's car was sleek and expensive. Emily could feel the smooth leather seat beneath her fingers. She imagined what the dashboard must look like, what color the car was, what expression Michael wore as he drove. Did he regret this as much as she already did? When they arrived at his home, a mansion far larger than anything Emily had ever lived in, Michael's tone was clipped and practical. "This will be your room." He guided her inside, his footsteps echoing against polished floors. "If you need help, my housekeeper, Mrs. Williams, will assist you. Surgery is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. Until then, try to rest." Emily paused at the doorway. "Our room?" she asked softly, her fingers tightening around her cane. Michael's reply was firm. "No, yours. I'm not interested in anything else. This arrangement is only for the surgery." The words stung more than she expected. She had not married him for love, but hearing him reject even the possibility of closeness cut her deeply. She nodded, biting her lip to stop the tears. "I understand." That night, lying alone in the king-sized bed of her new room, Emily pressed her hands against her face. She had dreamed of marriage as a union of souls, a gift from God. But this was loneliness wrapped in wealth, silence wrapped in coldness. Days turned into weeks. Emily tried her best to adapt to her new life. The mansion was like a maze, and though Mrs. Williams kindly guided her, she often found herself lost and humiliated. One afternoon she stumbled into Michael's study, knocking over a vase. The crash echoed loudly, and she froze, waiting for his anger. But Michael didn't shout. He only sighed. "Be careful. These things are expensive." His voice was calm, but not gentle. "I'm sorry," she whispered, kneeling to pick up the shards. Her fingers trembled as she searched blindly on the floor. To her surprise, Michael knelt beside her, his hand brushing against hers as he took the pieces. For the first time, Emily felt the warmth of his skin. But it lasted only a moment before he stood and walked away, leaving her heart racing with questions she couldn't answer. Despite his distance, Emily began to notice little things about him. She could hear the exhaustion in his footsteps when he returned late at night. She could smell the faint scent of coffee lingering on his clothes in the mornings. Sometimes, when he thought she was asleep, she heard him playing the piano in the living room, a melody full of sorrow, not unlike the tunes she often played at church. One evening, as she sat near the piano, her fingers tracing the keys, she spoke softly into the silence. "You play beautifully, Michael." He froze. "You were awake?" "Yes." She smiled faintly. "The way you play, it sounds like someone crying through music." Michael didn't reply for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost vulnerable. "Maybe that's what it is." Emily wanted to ask him why he was so sad, why his heart felt so closed. But she didn't. She knew he would only shut the door again. The days leading up to her surgery were filled with both hope and fear. Every night Emily prayed, asking God for courage. She imagined the first time she would open her eyes, the light flooding in, the faces she would see. She longed to see Sarah, to see the children she taught, to see herself in the mirror for the first time. And, though she hated to admit it, she longed to see Michael. But along with hope came doubt. What if the surgery failed? What if she lost not just her sight, but her music, her faith, her reason to keep going? And what if, after seeing the world, she discovered that Michael was as cold on the outside as he was within? One night, unable to sleep, Emily found herself outside his study door. She could hear him moving inside, pacing restlessly. Gathering her courage, she knocked. The door opened after a long pause. "Emily." His voice was cautious. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. I needed someone to talk to." Michael hesitated before letting her in. She sat in the chair across from his desk, gripping her cane. "Do you ever wonder if we're making mistakes?" she asked softly. Michael leaned back, his sigh heavy. "Every day." "Then why did you marry me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. The room grew still. Finally, Michael said, "Because I needed someone I could trust." His voice cracked slightly, though he quickly covered it with a cough. "And maybe, because I thought you could save me from myself." Emily's heart ached at his words. There was a brokenness in him she didn't understand, but she wanted to. She wanted to reach into his darkness the way she hoped he would reach into hers. Before she could speak, Michael stood abruptly. "You should rest. The surgery is in a few days. You'll need your strength." She left the study with tears in her eyes, both from fear and from the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, their marriage wasn't only a transaction. On the morning of the surgery, as nurses prepared her, Emily whispered a prayer. "Lord, give me strength. And if I see today, let the first thing my eyes behold be a blessing." Michael stood by her side as the anesthesia was administered. For the first time, he took her hand, not as a doctor, not as part of a deal, but as a man holding onto something precious. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. And then everything faded into darkness. The first thing Emily became aware of was the soft rhythm of a heart monitor, beeping steadily beside her bed. The second was the heavy bandage wrapped around her eyes. She had expected darkness, but this was different, thicker, suffocating, filled with both dread and hope. "Emily." A gentle voice spoke. It was Sarah. Her best friend's hand slipped into hers, warm and trembling. "You did it. The surgery is over. Now you just have to rest." Emily tried to smile, but her throat was dry. How long?" "The doctors said a few days before they remove the bandages," Sarah replied. "Your eyes need time to heal. Michael will explain more." At the sound of his name, Emily turned her head slightly, listening. She could feel his presence even before he spoke. His footsteps were precise, his tone calm, professional. "The surgery was successful. But you need to be patient. The light may be overwhelming at first." Her lips parted. "So, it worked." Michael hesitated for the briefest moment, then said, "Yes. We'll know for sure once the bandages are off." Emily clutched the blanket tightly. For the first time in her life, hope wasn't a dream, it was a heartbeat, steady and strong in her chest. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to run outside and feel the sunlight on her face. But instead, she lay still, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." The days that followed were the longest of her life. Every hour crawled by. She listened to the sounds of the hospital, to Sarah's cheerful chatter, to Michael's quiet instructions. But inside, she was a storm. What if she opened her eyes and saw nothing? What if the surgery had failed after all? Sometimes, late at night when she thought she was alone, she heard Michael's voice. He would sit by her bedside, speaking so softly she almost wondered if it was a dream. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. Stronger than me." Once, she almost answered. But she kept still, afraid he would pull away if he knew she was awake. Finally, the day arrived. The nurse's hands were gentle as she unwrapped the bandages, layer by layer. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, each turn of the gauze bringing her closer to a moment she had waited for her entire life. Michael was in the room, his voice steady but clipped, giving instructions. Sarah squeezed her hand, whispering prayers under her breath. "Are you ready?" the nurse asked softly. Emily swallowed hard. Yes. The final layer was lifted. At first, there was nothing but blinding light, sharp, painful, overwhelming. Emily gasped, squeezing her eyes shut again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "It hurts." "It's normal," Michael said quickly, his voice tight. "Your eyes are adjusting. Take your time." Slowly, shakily, Emily opened them again. Shapes began to form. Shadows sharpened. Colors bled into her vision, blue, white, green. Her breath caught as the world came alive before her. "I can see," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh, my God, I can see." Sarah laughed and sobbed all at once, hugging her tightly. "Emily, you're seeing me. You're really seeing me." Emily stared at her best friend, the golden hair, the freckles she had only heard described, the tears running down her face. It was overwhelming, too beautiful for words. And then her eyes turned toward him. Michael stood a few steps away, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. For the first time, Emily saw the man she had married. His dark hair was neatly combed, his jawline sharp, his eyes a piercing gray that held a storm within them. He was handsome, striking even, but there was a sadness etched into his features that no scalpel could ever fix. Her heart pounded. You're Michael. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, maybe, or pain. Yes, he said simply. Emily wanted to thank him, to run into his arms, to share the joy exploding inside her chest. But his posture, his guarded tone, kept her rooted in place. He looked at her not like a husband proud of his wife, but like a man terrified of what came next. That night, when Sarah finally left, Emily sat by the hospital window, staring at the moon for the first time in her life. She traced its glow with her eyes, marveling at every detail. Michael entered quietly, standing beside her. You should be resting, he said. I don't want to close my eyes, she whispered. Not after waiting so long to use them. She turned to him, studying his face again. You're not what I imagined. He raised a brow. Disappointed. She shook her head, smiling softly. No, just different. You look strong, but your eyes, they look lonely. Michael stiffened. You should sleep, Emily. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away too quickly. Her smile faltered. Why did you really marry me, Michael? His jaw clenched. For a moment, she thought he might finally open his heart. But instead, he whispered, because I needed you. And with that, he left the room. Emily sat in silence, her newfound sight blurring with tears. She had gained the world, but somehow, her heart told her she was still blind. Blind to the truth Michael carried, blind to the secret that kept him from loving her the way she desperately wished he would. And though she didn't know it yet, that truth would soon come crashing into her life, threatening not only her fragile marriage but also the very gift she had just received. The world was a miracle, and yet, it was terrifying. For Emily, every morning was an adventure. She woke up in the mansion, her eyes searching the high ceilings, the polished furniture, the curtains that danced when the morning breeze slipped through the window. Everything felt new, overwhelming, almost too much to take in. She would stand for hours in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. Her face was pale, her hair chestnut brown, her eyes still adjusting but glowing with curiosity. For the first time in her life, she knew what she looked like, and it brought tears every time. Simple things made her laugh and cry. She would walk outside barefoot, staring at the green grass beneath her toes. She'd sit in the garden, marveling at the colors of flowers she had once only touched in blindness. Roses weren't just soft petals anymore, they were crimson fire blooming against the earth. Daisies weren't just gentle shapes, they were tiny suns holding light in their centers. Sarah visited often, and every time, Emily would grab her hand excitedly. Your hair is golden, Sarah. And your eyes, they're so blue, like the sky. Sarah laughed through tears. And you, Emily, are even more beautiful than I imagined. But joy was not the only thing that came with sight. There was also fear. Crowded places made Emily dizzy, the flood of colors and shapes overwhelmed her. She tripped often, her hands reaching for balance. Sometimes she closed her eyes just to find peace again, retreating into the familiar darkness. Michael noticed, though he never said much. He was always near, watching her quietly as she explored her new world. His presence was steady, like a shadow that never left her side. One evening, Emily found him sitting in the living room, staring at the fireplace. His gray eyes reflected the flames, but his face was unreadable. She sat across from him, tilting her head. Why do you always look so sad, Michael? His jaw tightened. I don't. Yes, you do, she said softly. Even when you smile, it never reaches your eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, and for once, he didn't turn away. Maybe I've seen too much of the world, Emily. And maybe, I don't believe in what you believe anymore. Her brows furrowed. And what is it I believe? Hope, faith, love. His voice was sharp, but beneath it was a tremor. Emily reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. He didn't pull away this time. Maybe that's why God put me here, she whispered. To remind you those things are real. Michael didn't answer. But his silence spoke louder than words. It was a silence filled with fear, with walls built around a wounded heart. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Emily began to feel things she didn't expect. She had entered the marriage for her sight, for her dream, but now she found her heart tied to Michael in ways she couldn't explain. When he walked into a room, her chest tightened. When he spoke, Even in his cold tone, she listened as if his words carried weight beyond measure. One night, as rain poured outside, Emily sat at the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys. The melody was soft, aching. Michael stood behind her, listening. "Do you always play sad songs?" he asked quietly. "They're not sad," she replied, turning to look at him. "They're prayers in music." He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her. "And what are you praying for now?" Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to say you. She wanted to say she prayed for him to find healing, to let love in. But instead, she whispered, "For light. For peace." Michael's eyes softened for just a moment before hardening again. He turned away. "Peace is an illusion. Not if you let God in," she said firmly. His footsteps froze, but he didn't look back. "God wasn't there when I needed him." The words cut through Emily like a blade. She had never heard such bitterness in his voice. Something had broken him long ago, something he had buried so deeply he refused to let anyone touch it. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily couldn't sleep. Questions swirled in her mind. What had happened to him? Why did he need her as his wife so badly? Why did he refuse to believe in hope? And slowly, she realized, Michael wasn't just a surgeon who gave her sight. He was a man carrying a secret so heavy it had stolen his faith. A secret she was determined to uncover. Because deep in her heart, Emily had begun to feel something she never thought she would in such a marriage. She was falling in love with him. But love, she would soon learn, was not enough to erase the truth Michael had hidden. And when it finally came to light, it would test not only her marriage but also her very soul. Emily's days were filled with wonder, but her nights were filled with questions. Every sunrise brought new colors, new sights, new laughter. Yet every sunset brought her back to the same silence, to the same man whose walls were too high to climb. Michael had given her eyes, but not his heart. The mansion was large, but it often felt like a prison of unspoken words. Emily would explore the garden, tracing every flower with her vision, trying to memorize them. She would play the piano, filling the rooms with music. But no matter what she did, she always felt Michael's presence like a shadow, there, but unreachable. One evening, as she walked through the hall, she heard voices coming from Michael's study. The door was slightly open. She froze, listening. "You can't keep hiding this from her, Michael," Mrs. Williams, the housekeeper, said sternly. "I don't owe her the truth," Michael replied, his tone clipped. "She's your wife," Mrs. Williams insisted. "She deserves to know." Michael's voice lowered, trembling with anger. "If she finds out, she'll leave. And I can't lose her. Not now." Emily's heart pounded. She stepped back quietly, her breath shaking. What truth was he hiding? Why was he so afraid of losing her when he barely showed her affection? That night, she confronted him. They sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence heavy. Finally, Emily set down her fork. "Michael, what aren't you telling me?" His eyes snapped to hers, sharp, almost panicked. "What are you talking about?" "I heard you with Mrs. Williams," she said softly. "You said if I knew the truth, I'd leave." "What truth, Michael?" For a long time, he said nothing. His fingers tightened around his glass, his jaw clenched. Finally, he whispered, "Drop it, Emily." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "I can't. You married me for a reason you've never explained. You gave me sight, but you're still keeping me in the dark. Please, tell me." Michael pushed back his chair abruptly, standing. His gray eyes burned with something she couldn't name, fear, anger, pain. "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do," she pleaded, standing as well. "I'm your wife, Michael. I deserve to know why you chose me." His fists clenched. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Because you reminded me of her." The words crashed through the room like thunder. Emily froze. Her. Michael turned away, his shoulders shaking. "My fiancée. Anna. She was blind, just like you. I was going to marry her. I was going to give her the surgery, just like I gave you. But," his voice broke. "She died. A car accident. I couldn't save her." Emily's breath hitched. Her knees weakened, and she gripped the table for support. "Michael." He turned back, his face twisted with pain. "When I met you, it was like seeing her all over again. Your voice, your courage, your blindness, it tore me apart. I couldn't let you go through life the way she did. I thought, if I gave you sight, if I married you, maybe it would heal me. Maybe it would bring her back. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Her heart ached for his pain, but also for herself. So I'm just a replacement. A shadow of the woman you really loved. Michael's face crumbled. He took a step forward, reaching for her, but she stepped back. I didn't mean for it to be like that, he whispered. At first, yes, but then, you became more. You're not Anna, Emily. You're you. And you're the only reason I'm still breathing. Emily shook her head, sobbing. You should have told me. You should have trusted me with the truth instead of chaining me to a marriage built on lies. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Michael's eyes glistened. For once, the cold surgeon was gone, and in his place was a broken man, begging without words. I was afraid, he said finally. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid you'd walk away. And I can't lose you, Emily. Not after losing her. Emily turned away, her heart shattering. She had dreamed of marriage, of love, of truth. But now she felt like nothing more than a stand-in for a ghost. That night, she packed a small bag. Sarah came to pick her up, her arms wrapping around her trembling friend. Emily, are you sure? Sarah asked gently. Emily nodded through tears. I can't stay in a house where love feels like a bargain. I need to find out if Michael loves me, or just for who I remind him of. As the car pulled away, Michael stood in the doorway of the mansion, his figure silhouetted against the light. His hands hung helplessly at his sides, his eyes hollow with loss. He didn't try to stop her. Because deep down, he knew she was right. The truth had been revealed. And now, their love, if it was real at all, would have to survive the fire of honesty, or be reduced to ashes.